Hello everyone, welcome to the third video of this concurrency playlist, and in this video we are going to cover the topic of isolation and its problem. So isolation means if there are two transactions happening in the system, let transaction T1 and transaction T2. So transaction T1 wants that my transaction should not get affected by any other transaction of the system. My transaction 1 should be isolated from all the other transactions, and same transaction 2 also wants my transaction T2 should not get affected by any other transactions. But there are some problems that these transactions are going to face. So there are three types of problem in the system, that is dirty read, non-repeatable read and phantom read. So let's now understand these three problems. So first problem is of dirty read. So there are two transactions that are happening at the same time, transaction 1 and transaction 2. So what is happening? Transaction T1 make a read call to the database and get the value id equals to 1 and status equals to free. Perfect. And the transaction T2 also make a read call and get the value id equals to 1 and status equals to free. Now what happened? At the time T2, transaction 2 change the row, take a write log, make a write call, make a update query and change the status equals to booked. Everything is fine. Of course, transaction 2 can updated the database, and at time T3, transaction 1 read this row again. This time transaction get the value of booked. This time if we get the value of booked, transaction 1 read this data. Everything is now fine because transaction 2 have changed the data. But after some time in the transaction 2 there was some problem occur, and what happened? Our commit got failed. It means we are into a rollback scenario. The whole transaction 2 will roll back as we have studied in our transaction. So what will happen? We'll again reach into the state of free, but this time the transaction 1 has reached to the status of booked, and that is not correct because transaction 1 is reading the data of booked and transaction 2 reach to the status equals to free, and this is not a good scenario because transaction 1 is in a booked state. That is not possible. So we reach into the property of dirty read. This is a dirty read problem. Now let's understand the problem of non-repeatable read. So again there are two transactions, transaction 1 and transaction 2 are started. Transaction 1 at time T1 make a read call to the system. id equals to 1 and status equals free. Everything is perfectly fine. In the transaction 2 is started at time T2, what happened? He also make the read call id equals to 1 status equals to free. id equals to 1 and status equals to book. At time T3 change the status, and at time T4 committed the transaction, and the transaction was successful this time. So what happened? Transaction 2 has started, transaction 2 has ended here. Change that particular row. Previously value was free and now change the value from free to booked and committed that transaction. At time T5 what happened? Transaction 1 is reading the row again, one more time make a read call. This time the transaction 1 is getting the status equals to booked. Previously it was getting the status equal to free. This time we are getting the status equal to booked, and of course transaction 2 this time make a genuine change. Previously we are in the scenario of a rollback, but this time everything is perfect. Then also there is a problem. So transaction in a non-repeatable problem says that in the same transaction every time when we are getting a row we should get the same value, but previously we were getting the status equal to free and this time we are getting status equals to booked. So in a same transaction, any times we are going to make a read call, we should get the same data, but we are getting a different data. That is a problem of non-repeatable read. Now let's understand the problem of phantom read. So phantom read says that whenever you make a range query, so let's take a range query that id greater than equals to 0 and id less than equals to 6. So if we make this range query, what will happen? So if in a transaction T1 I get two rows, id1 and id4, so whatever the status doesn't matter, but this is our query, id greater than equal to 0 and id less than equal to 6. Now what will happen? Suppose there is one more transaction T2 happened anywhere in the system, and what will it do? It will insert one more row between this range, id greater than equal to 0 and id less than equal to 6, and inserted one row, assuming that it inserted one row id equals to 5. If it inserted one more row in between this range, now what will happen? At a time T2, transaction 1 again make a read call to the database. What will happen? It will get 3 rows. Previously it was getting 2 rows, this time it will getting 3 rows. So what the phantom read problem says, how many times you run a range query. Previously if you are getting 2 rows, this time also you should get the 2 rows, but you are getting 3 rows, and now you reach into the problem of phantom read. So now let's me summarize all the 3 problems to you one more time. So dirty read says that if you are reading a data status equals to free, and now you are reading a data status equals to booked because of transaction 2, and transaction 2 never reached to the status of status equals to booked because it rollbacks because of some error, and you make a dirty read. This status equals to booked is never possible. This is the problem of dirty read. Now in the non-repeatable read says that in a same transaction, anytime you read a row, you should get the same value of all the parameters of that particular row. But what happens, status equals to free previously, and in the same transaction what we get, status equals to booked. This is the problem of non-repeatable read. And the phantom read says that whenever you run a range query in a transaction, if you are getting n number of rows, second time if you make a read query in the transaction, you should get n number of rows only. But what happened, we are getting n plus 1 rows, we are getting one extra row in that range. So this is the problem of phantom read. So this is all for this video, and in the next video we are going to see the isolation labels. Thank you for watching me, and bye bye.